Du Kang had ruled the West Coast for 18 years without emotion, mercy, or belief in old myths. His family's bloodline power, an ancient force feared by empires, had gone silent decades ago, and he was glad it stayed buried. Until the night a cleaning woman touched him. Jasmine Peters wasn't supposed to matter. She was just there to clean the stone chamber no outsider was allowed to understand. But when she grabbed his wrist to stop herself from falling, the room froze. The symbols on the walls ignited. The altar cracked, and the power his family lost came roaring back. Through her. Du felt it instantly. This wasn't activation. This was interference. Because the force waking inside him wasn't responding to his blood, it was reacting to hers. And in that moment, he understood the truth his ancestors warned about. When two legacies collide at equal strength, destiny doesn't choose a winner. It creates a war that can never end. And the worst part? Neither of them is allowed to walk away alive once the prophecy is complete. The stone chamber beneath the West Coast compound. Before the story continues, let me say this. If these stories comfort you, entertain you, or make you feel understood, please subscribe. It's free, but it means everything to this channel. Now, let's continue. The stone chamber beneath the West Coast compound hadn't been opened in 18 years. Du Kang preferred it that way. Some legacies were better left buried, especially ones that had consumed his grandfather, driven his father to madness, and left their entire bloodline marked by empires that no longer existed. He stood at the entrance now, wheelchair positioned precisely 3 feet from the threshold he'd sworn never to cross again. The new cleaning service had been vetted, background checked, and given explicit instructions: surface cleaning only. No touching the artifacts, no questions about the symbols carved into every surface. The woman who arrived wasn't what he expected. Jasmine Peters moved through the corridor with the confidence of someone who'd walked through worse than underground chambers belonging to criminal organizations. She was beautiful, curves that defied the drab cleaning uniform, dark skin that seemed to absorb and reflect the dim lighting simultaneously, hair pulled back in a neat bun that suggested precision rather than submission. She didn't flinch when she saw him, didn't offer the pitying look he'd grown to despise or the fear he'd learned to weaponize. "Mr. Kang," her voice carried a British African accent that caught him off guard. "I was told the chamber needs deep cleaning, not surface work. The previous service left residue on several artifacts that's causing deterioration." Du-Yun's jaw tightened. "You were told wrong. Surface only. Then you'll have permanent damage within 6 months." She moved past him into the chamber, and he felt something shift in the air he hadn't experienced since childhood, before the power went silent. "These symbols are carved with silver alloy. The oxidation pattern suggests someone's been using incorrect cleaning agents. Whoever hired the last service didn't know what they were protecting." She was already examining the walls, fingers hovering inches above the carvings without touching. Professional, knowledgeable, completely inappropriate for this space. "Stop," his command cracked through the chamber. Jasmine turned, one eyebrow raised. "Stop what? My job? This isn't a museum. You don't need to understand what's here. I understand more than you think." She pulled out her phone, showing him photographs of similar symbol systems. Mesopotamian binding script, Korean shamanic seals, and something older, Proto-Cushitic guardian marks. This chamber was built at an intersection point. Someone in your family knew exactly what they were doing. Du-Yun's heart rate spiked. Nobody outside the family should recognize the script combinations, let alone identify the deliberate architectural convergence. "Where did you get those photographs?" "My own family's archives." She tucked her phone away. "Before I took this contract, I researched the property. These symbols match guardianship sites across 3 continents. Your family wasn't just powerful, Mr. Kang. They were keepers of something ancient. And judging by the degradation pattern, whatever they were keeping locked down is getting restless. You need to leave. I need to do my job, unless you'd prefer the bindings fail completely." She moved deeper into the chamber, toward the central altar where the family's power had originally been bound. The convergence point is here. The symbols aren't just decorative, they're actively suppressing something, and suppression requires maintenance. Du-Yoon rolled forward, blocking her path. I said, leave. Jasmine stopped, studying him with eyes that saw too much. Why are you afraid of your own legacy? I'm not. You are. You've kept this chamber sealed for years, let the bindings deteriorate, and you're sitting here in that chair refusing to cross the threshold. Something happened here, something that took your power and your mobility. She crouched to his eye level, and the movement was graceful despite her size, confident despite his reputation. But you're still the keeper, whether you accept it or not, and this space is dying because you're starving it. The audacity should have triggered his anger. Instead, Du-Yoon found himself caught by her certainty, the absolute lack of fear or judgment in her expression. She wasn't looking at a disabled mafia boss. She was looking at a man running from his birthright. What do you know about keeper legacies? Everything. Jasmine stood. My family has guarded artifacts and sites for 12 generations. We don't own power, we protect it, contain it, and sometimes redirect it. The marks on my shoulders are proof of inheritance. The knowledge in my head is proof of mastery. And the fact that I'm standing in this chamber feeling the pull of active magic means your family's legacy isn't as dead as you think. She turned toward the altar, and Du-Yoon saw it, the faint luminescence beginning to gather around the carved symbols, responding to her presence. Don't touch anything, he warned. I won't need to. The chamber recognizes guardian bloodlines. It's already... The floor trembled. Jasmine stumbled, reaching automatically for the nearest support, which happened to be Du-Yoon's wheelchair arm, her hand wrapped around the metal frame, her fingers brushing against his wrist. The world exploded into light. Du-Yoon felt it instantly, the power that had been silent for 18 years suddenly roaring back to life, not as a whisper, but as a tidal wave. It crashed through his nervous system, igniting pathways that had been dead since the accident. The symbols on the walls blazed, casting shadows that moved independently of any light source. But it wasn't responding to his bloodline alone. The power was reacting to Jasmine's touch, to the guardian magic in her veins, creating a feedback loop that neither bloodline was designed to handle. Where his family's legacy could break curses and impose unbreakable bonds, her family's could seal, protect, and redirect magical forces across any distance. They were perfect opposites, perfect equals. And according to the prophecy his grandfather had died trying to prevent, perfect enemies. The altar cracked down the center. Jasmine jerked her hand back, breaking contact. The light died immediately, leaving them in sudden darkness, illuminated only by emergency lighting. What? She breathed, staring at her palm where faint marks glowed beneath the skin. Was that? Du-Yoon's hands shook on the wheelchair controls. He could still feel the power coursing through him, no longer silent but screaming for release. And worse, he could feel her, a presence in his mind that shouldn't be possible, a connection that the old texts had warned would destroy both bloodlines if it ever manifested. That, he said, voice hoarse, was the beginning of a war neither of us can walk away from. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Love and Tension for more stories like this. Jasmine left the compound within the hour, contract terminated by mutual agreement. She took her equipment, her knowledge, and the glowing marks that had appeared on her palm, marks that matched the ones now visible on Du-Yoon's wrist. 3 weeks later, she stood in her London flat, surrounded by her family's archive, trying to understand what had happened in that chamber. The texts were explicit. When a breaker bloodline and a guardian bloodline made contact at a convergence point with equal strength, they created a binding prophecy. Two legacies would merge into eternal opposition, neither able to destroy each other, neither able to ignore each other, locked in a cycle that would pass to their descendants until one bloodline ended completely. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Peters? Jasmine. We need to talk. I've been researching. What happened is irreversible. I know. My family's texts confirm it. A pause. There's a scroll. It was hidden in the chamber. activated when you touched me. According to the translation, it contains the full prophecy and the only method to either complete or nullify the binding. Jasmine's chest tightened. Where is this scroll now? That's the problem. It transported itself to a neutral site the moment the binding activated, a place where neither bloodline has advantage, a convergence point in neutral territory. Kenya, the Rift Valley specifically. Of course, the oldest convergence point on the continent where her ancestors had first learned guardian magic before spreading across the world, and where his ancestors sent envoys centuries ago seeking to understand powers they couldn't break. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow." "Miss Peters." "Jasmine, you need to understand what you're walking into. My organization has enemies. They will see you as a weakness, and if they discover what you are, what we've become," he exhaled slowly, "they'll try to kill you to break the binding. Let them try." Jasmine looked at the marks on her palm, now a permanent silver scar pattern that pulsed with warmth. "I've been protecting artifacts from warlords, smugglers, and rogue practitioners since I was 16. I'm not afraid of your enemies, Do-Yoon." The use of his first name created a silence on the line. "You should be, because I am." The flight to Kenya was tense. Do-Yoon's security team flanked them, alert to threats Jasmine couldn't yet see. But she noticed how they watched her too, assessing, measuring, wondering what power she held over their boss. Do-Yoon noticed her observation. "They're trying to determine if you're an asset or a liability. And what have you told them?" "That you're both." He met her gaze directly. "The binding is growing stronger. I can feel you now, your location, your emotional state, even your thoughts if I concentrate. The prophecy is forcing proximity. The more we resist, the more painful it becomes." Jasmine had felt it too, a pull toward him that intensified with distance, a need to be near that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with magical compulsion. "Your texts mentioned a completion clause. What happens if we complete the prophecy instead of fighting it?" "According to my grandfather's notes, completion requires a convergence ritual at the scroll's location. Both bloodlines would merge fully, not romantically or physically, but mystically. We'd become a single force split between two bodies. Perfect balance, perfect opposition." "That doesn't sound like completion. That sounds like eternal stalemate." "Exactly." Do-Yoon's expression was grim. "We'd never be able to harm each other, but we'd also never be free of each other. Every descendant of our bloodlines would inherit the same binding. The war would never end. It would just evolve." "And the alternative? One of us dies before the ritual completes, the binding breaks, the survivor keeps their power, and the prophecy ends." Jasmine looked out the window at the African landscape passing below. "You brought me here knowing one of us has to die. I brought you here because you deserve the choice." His voice softened. "Walk away now, Jasmine. Return to London. I'll face the scroll alone and let the prophecy take whatever it wants from me. Your bloodline will be free. And yours? Dies with me. I have no heirs. The Breaker legacy ends. The Guardian legacy continues. A clean resolution." She turned to face him fully. "You're offering to sacrifice yourself. I'm offering you freedom." Jasmine studied his face, the hard lines softened by genuine concern, the eyes that had seen too much violence now showing unexpected vulnerability. She'd researched him during the 3 weeks apart, knew about the accident that had killed his father and brother, the internal war that had left him in the wheelchair, the 18 years of ruling through fear because mercy was perceived as weakness. He was dangerous, he was damaged, and he was offering her the one thing most powerful men never offered, a choice with no strings attached. "No," she said simply. "No? I didn't come to Kenya to watch you commit noble suicide. I came to find a third option." She pulled out her tablet showing him documents she'd compiled. "Your family's texts are incomplete. They focus on the Breaker perspective, how to end curses, how to impose bonds. But Guardian magic is about balance and redirection. What if the prophecy isn't a curse at all? What if it's a tool? Do-yoon leaned forward, reading quickly. You think we can redirect the binding? I think whoever created this prophecy wanted to create a weapon. Two bloodlines locked in eternal conflict would generate enormous magical energy, energy that could be harvested, controlled, or directed towards other purposes. But if we understand the mechanism, we might be able to rewrite the parameters. That would require both bloodlines working in perfect synchronization. Yes, Jasmine met his gaze steadily. It would require trust. Can you do that, Do-yoon? Trust someone who's technically your predestined enemy? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. I trusted you the moment you walked into that chamber and understood what you were seeing. Everything since then has just been confirming what I already knew. Which is what? That you're the most dangerous person I've ever met. He smiled slightly, the expression transforming his face, and that I'd rather fight beside you than against you. The convergence site in the Rift Valley was breathtaking, a natural amphitheater carved by ancient volcanic activity, walls covered in the same symbol combinations that decorated Do-yoon's chamber. The scroll hovered in the center, suspended by invisible forces, pulsing with light that shifted between the silver of guardian magic and the crimson of breaker power. Jasmine approached it carefully, feeling the pull intensify with each step. Beside her, Do-yoon maneuvered his chair over the rough terrain with practiced efficiency, never asking for help, never showing frustration at the limitations. The prophecy is already affecting us, Do-yoon observed. My guardian instinct is to protect the scroll. My breaker instinct is to shatter it. We're being pushed towards opposing actions. Then we do neither. Jasmine circled the scroll, examining the magical structure without touching it. We treat it like any other artifact. Contain it, study it, understand it before we interact with it. That's your professional training talking. Yes, and your professional training is telling you to assess threats, identify weaknesses, and neutralize efficiently. So let's combine those approaches. She pulled out tools from her pack, specialized instruments designed to measure magical resonance without triggering defensive wards. I map the guardian seals, you identify the breaker bonds, and we construct a complete picture before either of us touches it. For the next 6 hours, they worked in a synchronization that should have taken months to develop. Jasmine would call out a seal pattern, and Do-yoon would immediately identify the corresponding breaker bond. He'd spot a vulnerability in the curse structure, and she'd suggest guardian reinforcements that could stabilize it. The prophecy, it turned out, was elegantly simple and utterly devastating. It's designed to create perfect opposition, Do-yoon said, studying their combined notes. Every time one bloodline gains advantage, the other automatically receives equal power to counter it. The balance is enforced mystically. We literally cannot harm each other beyond superficial damage, but we can harm everyone else, Jasmine added grimly. The energy generated by our conflict amplifies both our abilities. The longer we fight, the stronger we become, and the more dangerous we are to anyone caught in the crossfire. A weapon designed to destroy everything except itself. Exactly. She sat back, frustrated. Whoever created this prophecy wanted two bloodlines locked in eternal escalation. The war wouldn't just pass to our descendants, it would consume civilizations. Do-yoon was quiet, hands steepled beneath his chin in thought. What if we refuse to fight? The binding compels conflict. We've both felt it, the push towards opposition. Physical conflict, yes, but what about intellectual opposition? Philosophical debate? We're already in conflict right now. You approaching this from a guardian perspective, me from a breaker perspective. The prophecy registers that as engagement. Jasmine straightened, understanding dawning. You're suggesting we redirect the conflict into collaboration, use our opposing viewpoints as a strength rather than a weakness. The prophecy was designed assuming both bloodlines would try to destroy each other. What if we accept the binding, but redefine what conflict means? He rolled forward, examining the scroll from a new angle. Guardian magic and Breaker magic are opposites, but opposites can create balance instead of destruction. If we work together, the power generated doesn't have to be weaponized. It could be used for actual protection and actual justice. Jasmine felt excitement building. A guardian who can break curses, a breaker who can seal threats. We'd be unstoppable, Do-yoon finished, which is why this will make us targets. Every organization that relies on magical imbalance will want us dead. My enemies in the criminal world, your rivals in the artifact trade, governments who fear magic they can't control. So we're choosing a different kind of war. We're choosing the war we can live with. He extended his hand. Partners? Jasmine looked at his hand, at the marks on his wrist that matched the ones on her palm. The moment she took it, they'd commit to a path neither could fully predict, but walking away meant watching him die or dying herself, and she'd discovered over the past weeks that she wasn't willing to accept either outcome. She gripped his hand firmly. Partners. The marks flared, and the scroll reacted immediately. The prophecy recognized their choice, not completion, not destruction, but redefinition. The binding shifted, transforming from a compulsion to fight into a foundation for collaboration. It still couldn't be broken. They were still locked together for life. Their descendants would still inherit the connection, but the war had changed into something neither bloodline had anticipated, an alliance that would terrify everyone else. We'll need rules, Jasmine said as the magical surge settled. Boundaries, a framework for how this partnership functions. Agreed. Your expertise with artifacts and guardian networks, my infrastructure and organization connections. We operate as equals. No hierarchy, no authority imbalance. When we disagree, we debate until we find synthesis or agree to table it. No unilateral action on anything affecting both bloodlines. And our personal lives? Jasmine asked carefully. The binding creates proximity, but it doesn't dictate intimacy. Do-yoon met her gaze steadily. We're partners, not prisoners. Whatever develops between us beyond the magical binding is our choice, not the prophecy's. Good. She released his hand, feeling the connection remain even without physical contact. Because I don't appreciate destiny making my romantic decisions. Nor do I. He smiled slightly, though I'd be lying if I said the prophecy was the only reason I'm relieved you're not walking away. Before Jasmine could respond, Do-yoon's head of security approached, expression tense. Sir, we have movement on the perimeter, multiple contacts, heavily armed. They knew we'd be here. Do-yoon's demeanor shifted instantly from thoughtful partner to dangerous operative. How many? At least 20. Military-grade equipment. They're setting up a perimeter. This is an extraction or elimination attempt. Jasmine felt Do-yoon's tactical mind engage through their connection, a cold calculation that should have frightened her, but instead felt protective. Who knows about the prophecy? She asked. Besides my inner circle, my enemies, my rivals, anyone who's been watching my family's legacy for signs of reactivation. His jaw tightened. They've been waiting 18 years for this moment. The instant the power came back online, they moved. Then we move first. Jasmine stood, pulling equipment from her pack. I can raise guardian wards around the site. It'll slow them down. And I can break whatever mystical protections they're using to mask their approach. Do-yoon's eyes gleamed with the first hint of the power he'd kept buried. They came here expecting to face us separately. Let's show them what perfect opposition actually means. The attack came at sunset, when the convergence site's power was naturally amplified. 20 mercenaries supported by 3 practitioners channeling stolen artifacts, all focused on a single goal: kill the breaker, capture the guardian, and claim the prophecy scroll for whoever was funding the operation. They didn't expect resistance. Jasmine's guardian wards manifested as walls of pure force, deflecting bullets and absorbing magical attacks with equal efficiency. She wove the protections while Do-yoon identified and dismantled the mystical shields protecting their attackers, stripping away every defensive ward with surgical precision. Northwest corner, Do-yoon called out. 3 practitioners channeling binding curses. Break pattern on my mark. Jasmine adjusted her ward structure, creating a temporary gap that allowed Do-yoon's curse-breaking power to lance through. The enemy practitioner's spell shattered, backlash sending them flying. Perimeter holding, but they're adapting. Someone's feeding them real-time countermeasures. Because someone knows both our bloodlines. Do-yoon's jaw darkened. This isn't opportunistic, this is planned. A voice echoed across the amphitheater, amplified by magic. Do-yoon Kong, stand down and the woman walks away unharmed. Do-yoon's hands tightened on his wheelchair grips. That's Park Jin-song. He was my father's lieutenant before the accident. The one who betrayed your family?
The one who caused the accident that killed my father and brother. He's been running a rival organization ever since, waiting for our bloodline to die out so he could claim our territories. Do-yoon's voice was cold fury. He can't let the power reactivate. It would tip the balance against him. Jasmine felt the tactical situation crystallizing through their connection. He needs you dead and me contained. If he kills us both, the prophecy fails and the power dissipates. Then we don't give him the satisfaction. Do-yoon's eyes met hers. Trust me? With my life. Good, because I'm about to do something incredibly reckless. He reached for the prophecy scroll. Do-yoon, wait! His hand closed around the parchment, and the world detonated into power. The scroll recognized his breaker bloodline, flooding him with 18 years of accumulated magical potential. But instead of trying to destroy the prophecy, Do-yoon channeled the energy outward, breaking every curse, every binding, every mystical protection within a 100-meter radius, including the one stabilizing the convergence site itself. The ground trembled. Ancient wards carved into the volcanic rock began to fail. Jasmine! Do-yoon threw the scroll toward her. Seal it, now! She copped the scroll reflexively, feeling her guardian magic surge in response. The prophecy wanted completion, wanted both bloodlines to merge fully at this moment of maximum power. But Jasmine understood what Do-yoon had done. By destabilizing the site, he'd created a crisis that required her guardian magic to prevent catastrophic collapse. The prophecy's energy couldn't be used for merging when it was needed for immediate survival. He'd weaponized their opposing natures against the prophecy itself. Jasmine slammed her palms against the ground, pouring every ounce of guardian power into reinforcing the failing wards. The site stabilized inch by inch, the ancient protections responding to her bloodline's command. The backlash from the conflicting energies created a shockwave that sent the mercenaries flying, disabled the practitioners, and carved a crater between the attackers and the convergence site. When the dust settled, Park Jin-song stood at the crater's edge, face twisted with rage. You've doomed us all! The convergence site is unstable. The wards will fail within hours. Then you'd better run, Do-yoon said coldly, because when they fail, everything within 5 kilometers gets pulled into a dimensional rift, including you. It was a bluff, probably. Jasmine couldn't be certain through the chaos of magical feedback, but Jin-sung didn't know that. The rival operative retreated, his remaining forces scattering. Jasmine slumped against a rock, exhausted. Did we actually destabilize the site? Partially. It'll reset within 72 hours. The wards are self-repairing. Do-yoon rolled over to her, looking equally drained. You've been hurt. Jasmine touched her temple, fingers coming away bloody. Shrapnel from the initial attack. I'll live. Do-yoon reached up, his hand gentle against her face as he examined the wound. The touch sent warmth through their connection, not magical compulsion, but genuine care. We need you to get medical attention. We need to secure the scroll first. The scroll is secure. He gestured to where the parchment had settled, now dormant and powerless.
The prophecy recognized our choice. It's no longer trying to force completion. We've locked it into the partnership framework instead of the war framework. Jasmine looked at the scroll, then at Do-yoon, seeing him clearly for the first time since the chaos began. Blood on his knuckles from fighting his wheelchair over rough terrain, exhaustion in every line of his face, but absolutely no regret. "You risked everything on a gamble that I'd understand your plan," she said quietly. "Not a gamble. Trust." He squeezed her hand gently. "Partners, remember? Partners," she echoed, and realized with startling clarity that somewhere between London and Kenya, between opposition and collaboration, she'd stopped seeing him as the dangerous mafia boss or the predestined enemy. She saw him as Do-yoon, brilliant, reckless, protective Do-yoon, who just destabilized an ancient convergence site to save her life. Drop a comment and let us know what you think will happen next. And if you're loving this story, hit that subscribe button for love and tension. We've got more epic tales coming your way. Recovery took 3 days at a secure location in Nairobi. Do-yoon's organization had contacts everywhere, and Jasmine was beginning to understand the true scope of his network. Not just criminal enterprise, but information brokers, legitimate businesses, and political connections spanning continents. "Your father built an empire," she observed, reviewing documents on the operation's structure. "Your father built a prison." Do-yoon did not look up from his own work, analyzing Jin Song's attack patterns for weaknesses. "Every connection is leverage someone else can use against you. Every alliance is a potential betrayal point. Then why maintain it?" "Because dismantling it would create a power vacuum that would kill thousands in the resulting chaos. I inherited this responsibility the day my father died. Until I find a way to transition it into something less destructive," he shrugged. "I manage it." Jasmine set aside the documents. "What would you do if you could choose freely? If the bloodline legacy, the organization, all of it, didn't exist?" Do-yoon was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilling on the keyboard. "I'd teach. History, probably. Archaeology. Spend my time understanding the past instead of managing the present." He looked at her. "You? I already do what I'd choose. Guardian work is my calling, not just my inheritance. But I'd like to do it without the constant threats, the violence, She gestured around them. "War." The prophecy guaranteed we'd always have enemies, but it also gave us the power to face them on equal terms. Do-yoon rolled over to where she sat, positioning his chair at an angle that let him meet her eyes directly. "I've been thinking about what comes next, after Kenya, after we've dealt with Jin Sung. And we build something new, a foundation maybe. Use my infrastructure and your expertise to actually protect artifacts and people, instead of controlling them. Route the organization's resources toward legitimate ends." He hesitated. "It would take years, probably decades, and we'd be targets the entire time. We're already targets. Together, officially, we'd be the biggest target in the magical world. Every practitioner who fears change would come after us." Jasmine considered this, feeling the weight of the choice. "And if we don't work together? If we each go back to our separate lives? The binding won't allow true separation. We'd be drawn back together every time there's a crisis. And the next generation would inherit an unresolved connection, more volatile, less controlled." He met her gaze steadily. "I won't condemn children who don't exist yet to a worse situation than ours. So we're doing this for hypothetical descendants? I'm doing this because in 3 weeks, you've become the most important person in my life, and I refuse to waste that on cowardice. The prophecy gave us proximity, but what I feel when I look at you, that's not magic. That's choice." Jasmine's breath caught. "Do-yoon, you don't have to respond. I'm not asking for reciprocation. I'm just explaining why I'm willing to fight for this partnership, for whatever future we can build." He started to roll back. "Take whatever time you—" She caught his chair, stopping his retreat. "You brilliant, frustrating man. Did it not occur to you that I might feel the same way?" He froze. "You... what?" "I've spent 12 years avoiding attachments because guardian work doesn't allow for personal connections. Too dangerous, too complicated, too many ways it could be used against me. And then you appeared. The one person in the world equally dangerous, equally targeted, equally unable to walk away from their responsibility. You're not a weakness, Do-yoon. You're the only person who makes sense. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the healing cut on her temple. We're absolutely insane. Completely. She leaned into his touch. But we're insane together, which somehow makes it survivable. The kiss was inevitable. Gentle at first, testing, then deeper as weeks of tension and denial finally broke. The prophecy pulsed through their connection, recognizing the shift from partnership to something more intimate. But it didn't compel or control. This was their choice. When they finally separated, Do-yoon rested his forehead against hers. I need to tell you something. About the accident. About why I've been in this chair for 18 years. You don't have to. I do. If we're building something real, you deserve the complete truth. He took a breath. The accident wasn't random. Jin Sung orchestrated it, but I contributed. My father wanted to complete a ritual that would have made our breaker power absolute, capable of shattering any magical protection, breaking any curse, even disrupting the guardian bloodlines permanently. Jasmine pulled back slightly, processing this. He wanted to destroy my family's legacy? He wanted to dominate. I was 22, arrogant, convinced our power made us untouchable. My brother tried to stop him. I didn't listen. Bitterness edged his voice. The ritual required blood sacrifice from the direct line. Jin Sung convinced my father that my brother's hesitation made him weak. So, my father chose him for the sacrifice. Do-yoon. I tried to stop it. Broke into the ritual chamber, tried to dismantle the spell, but I was too late. The backlash killed my father instantly, tore my brother apart, and severed my spinal cord. He met her eyes, unflinching. I destroyed my family, trying to save my brother, and I've spent 18 years wondering if I did the right thing, or just condemned us all. Jasmine understood the weight he'd been carrying, the guilt, the what-ifs, the isolation. You chose mercy over power. That's not weakness. My brother died anyway, but you stopped a ritual that would have waged war against every guardian bloodline on the planet, including mine. Your choice 18 years ago is the reason I'm alive to sit here with you now. How can I see that as anything but the right decision? Do-yoon's eyes glistened. You see good in things I can't forgive myself for. Then I'll keep reminding you until you believe it. She kissed him again, softer this time, a promise rather than passion. We're partners. That means carrying each other's burdens when they get too heavy. I don't want you carrying my... Too bad. Partnership is non-negotiable. She smiled. Besides, you'll have plenty of opportunity to carry mine. Guardian work isn't exactly trauma-free. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Fair point. They sat together in comfortable silence, processing the enormity of what they'd admitted. The prophecy hummed contentedly through their connection, no longer forcing conflict, simply facilitating the collaboration they'd chosen. What happens now? Jasmine asked. Now we deal with Jin Sung permanently. He won't stop coming after us. Then we make sure the next confrontation is on our terms. The final confrontation took place 6 weeks later at the original convergence site, Do-yoon's family compound in California. The stone chamber had been fully restored, Jasmine's expertise combined with Do-yoon's resources, creating a space that amplified both bloodline powers equally. Jin Sung came with an army, 50 operatives, a dozen practitioners, and stolen artifacts powerful enough to challenge even combined breaker and guardian magic. But he'd made one critical miscalculation. He still thought in terms of traditional power hierarchies: dominant and submissive, victor and victim. He didn't understand perfect equilibrium. Jasmine stood in the chamber's center, hands resting on the altar where the prophecy scroll now resided, fully integrated into the convergence point structure. Do-yoon was positioned exactly opposite her, the wheelchair no longer a symbol of limitation, but simply the platform from which he operated. They didn't need to discuss strategy. The connection between them had evolved beyond words into pure synchronization. Jin Sung descended into the chamber, flanked by his most powerful practitioners. "I'll offer this once, Do-yoon. Walk away from the woman, dissolve the binding, and I'll let you keep a small territory, enough to live comfortably. Or," Do-yoon's voice was calm, "you can't kill her," Do-yoon said simply. "The binding prevents it. Any lethal force directed at either of us rebounds onto the attacker with equal power. Then I'll find a way around the binding." Jin Sung raised his hand, and his practitioners began channeling curse energy. "Breaker power may protect you, but guardian magic has always had one weakness. It can be overwhelmed by sheer volume." The attack came from all directions simultaneously. Curse bolts, binding hexes, life-draining enchantments, all focused on Jasmine. She didn't move. Do-yoon's hands flexed, and every curse shattered mid-flight, dissolved into harmless light. His breaker power had evolved through their partnership, no longer just destroying curses, but redirecting their energy back to the source. Jin Sung's practitioners collapsed, backlash overwhelming their systems. "You were saying about overwhelming guardian magic?" Jasmine's voice carried across the chamber. Jin Sung's face twisted with rage. He pulled out a dagger, ancient, carved with symbols that predated both bloodlines. "Then I'll do this the old way, direct violence." He lunged at Jasmine. The dagger stopped inches from her throat, held by invisible force. Not guardian wards, something else, something new. The prophecy scroll blazed to life, and Jasmine understood what was happening. The binding had evolved. Where it had once been designed to create eternal conflict, their partnership had transformed it into eternal protection. Jin Sung couldn't hurt her, and through their connection, Do-yoon couldn't be harmed either. They'd created a closed system where violence became impossible. "The prophecy was never meant to be a weapon," Jasmine said, her voice echoing with power that wasn't entirely her own. "It was a test. Two bloodlines with perfect opposition, given a choice: destroy each other or transform conflict into collaboration." Do-yoon picked up the explanation seamlessly. "You assumed we'd follow the pattern of every generation before us: fight, kill, pass the war to our descendants. But we chose differently." The dagger in Jin Sung's hand crumbled to dust. The chamber's walls lit with symbols that combined breaker and guardian script, a new language neither bloodline had written alone. "The binding is complete," Jasmine and Do-yoon said in unison, their voices overlapping. "Not through domination, through balance." Jin Sung stumbled backward, understanding dawning. "You've made yourselves immune to violence. You're untouchable. Only to those who approach with intent to harm," Do-yoon corrected. "The prophecy recognizes threat versus challenge. You came here to kill. That's no longer possible. But others will come. Other enemies. Other attempts. Let them." Jasmine's smile was sharp. "Every attack will strengthen the binding. Every threat will reinforce the balance. You've created the very thing you feared most, Jin Sung, an unbreakable alliance between bloodlines you wanted destroyed." Jin Sung's remaining operatives had already begun retreating, recognizing a battle they couldn't win. Their leader stood alone in the chamber, facing two people who had transformed destiny itself. "I could still destroy your organization, dismantle everything your father built." "Please do," Do-yoon said calmly. "I've been looking for an excuse to completely restructure anyway. You'd be doing me a favor." The defeat in Jin Sung's eyes was absolute. He'd come expecting war and found something he couldn't comprehend. Cooperation so perfect it had rewritten magical law itself. He left without another word, and Jasmine knew instinctively he'd never return. The threat he represented had dissolved the moment they'd proven the binding couldn't be broken through violence. When the chamber was empty except for the two of them, Do-yoon rolled over to Jasmine's position. That was satisfying. Terrifying, but yes. She sat on the altar's edge, suddenly exhausted. "We've made ourselves targets for every practitioner who fears change. and allies for every practitioner who wants it. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. The foundation we discussed, it's not theoretical anymore. We have the power to actually reshape how magical bloodlines interact. No more eternal conflicts passed down through generations. Just one eternal partnership. Jasmine squeezed his hand. I can live with that. Good, because I'm not letting you back out now. He pulled something from his pocket. A ring carved from the same stone as the chamber walls, inscribed with symbols from both their bloodlines. I know we've only known each other 2 months. I know this is insane. I know the prophecy already binds us magically, so this is redundant. Do-yoon. She took the ring, examining the intricate carving. Is this a proposal or a legal brief? He laughed. Both? I'm not good at romantic gestures. You destabilized an ancient convergence site to save my life. I think you're better at them than you believe. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, warming to her skin as the inscriptions glowed. Yes, obviously yes. Obviously? We're bound by destiny, partnership, and apparently genuine affection. Marriage is just making it official for the mundane world. She leaned down to kiss him. Besides, someone needs to keep you from attempting any more incredibly reckless plans. I make no promises. I know, it's one of your more terrifying qualities. They sat together in the chamber that had started everything, surrounded by the symbols of their merged legacies, planning a future neither had imagined possible 2 months ago. The prophecy hummed contentedly through their connection. It had what it wanted, not war, but perfect balance. 2 forces that could never overpower each other, creating equilibrium that would ripple through their bloodlines for generations. But unlike every prophecy before it, this one had been redeemed, transformed from curse into blessing through the simple choice to cooperate instead of compete. 5 years later, the Foundation for Convergence Studies occupied a renovated building in Geneva, neutral territory for the magical world. Jasmine Peters Kang stood in the main gallery, reviewing the latest acquisition, a Sumerian artifact that had been stolen and recovered 17 times in the past century. This one goes in the secure vault, she told her assistant, a young woman whose guardian bloodline had awakened only 3 years ago. Yes, Director. The assistant carefully transported the artifact, while Jasmine made notes on the intake forms. Micromanaging again? Do-yoon's voice came from behind her. She turned to find her husband reviewing a tablet, chair positioned in the doorway between the gallery and his office. Says the man who reviews every protection contract personally. That's different. Security is my specialty. And artifact preservation is mine. We've been over this. He smiled, the expression coming easier now than it had 5 years ago. The Foundation gave him purpose beyond managing his family's criminal empire, which he'd systematically dismantled and redirected into legitimate enterprises. Some of his father's former associates had resisted. Most had found themselves facing breaker magic they couldn't defend against and guardian wards they couldn't penetrate. The ones who adapted thrived. The ones who didn't found other employment. We have a situation, Do-yoon said, setting aside the tablet. 2 practitioners requesting admission to the training program. Guardian bloodline from Ethiopia, Breaker bloodline from Korea. Jasmine felt a familiar pull through their connection, the prophecy recognizing potential. Related bloodlines? Distantly, 7th generation removed from ours. He met her eyes. They're engaged, planning to marry, came here specifically because they'd heard about what we built. 5 years ago, that would have been impossible. Breaker and Guardian bloodlines didn't cooperate, let alone marry. But their foundation had changed the narrative, proven that opposition could become collaboration with the right framework. Accept them both, Jasmine decided. Schedule an interview for next week. I want to meet them personally. Already done. I figured you'd say that. She crossed to him, perching on the arm of his chair. We're influencing how entire bloodlines interact now. That's terrifying, inspiring, inevitable. He wrapped an arm around her waist. Yes, all of the above. Yes. She leaned into him, comfortable in the proximity they'd chosen, rather than the proximity the prophecy had imposed. Do you think our descendants will thank us or curse us for this? Depends on the descendant, but they'll inherit a world where bloodline conflict isn't automatic, where breaker and guardian can coexist without war. That's more than we had. Speaking of descendants, Jasmine pulled out a small envelope from her pocket. Got some news today. Do-yoon went very still. Is that? Positive. About 8 weeks along. She watched his face carefully. I know we discussed waiting another year. He pulled her fully into his lap, chair stabilizers compensating automatically for the shift in weight. His hands cradled her face, eyes bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. This is the best news you could possibly give me. You're not worried? About the binding? The prophecy? What they might inherit? They'll inherit power, yes, but also partnership, balance, and parents who will teach them that opposing forces don't have to be opposing people. He kissed her gently. We'll figure it out, like we figure everything out. Together, always together. The foundation's doors opened, admitting a group of students, various bloodlines, all learning to work across traditional boundaries. Guardian protecting breaker, breaker defending guardian, cooperation replacing conflict one generation at a time. Jasmine watched them file past, heading to afternoon training sessions. 5 years ago, this scene would have been impossible. 10 years ago, unthinkable. But she and Do-yoon had proven that destiny was malleable, that prophecies could be redirected, that perfect opposition, given the choice, could become perfect partnership. What are you thinking? Do-yoon asked. That we broke the cycle. The armor our ancestors passed down for centuries. It ends with us, and starts new with them, not as conflict, but as legacy. A legacy of balance. Of choice, she corrected. We gave them the choice we almost didn't have. That's enough. Do-yoon was quiet for a moment. Then, your family's archives had a saying, didn't they? About guardian duty? Protect the power, protect the future, protect the choice. Why? Because we did all three. Protected our power by refusing to fight, protected the future by building this foundation, protected the choice by rewriting the prophecy itself. He looked at her with an expression of wonder that still sometimes caught her off guard. We actually did it, Jasmine. Changed everything. We're still changing it. She gestured to the students, to the foundation, to the life they'd built. Every day we choose cooperation over conflict, we reinforce the new pattern. Every bloodline that comes here learns a different way. An alarm chimed softly. Incoming message marked urgent. Do-yoon checked his tablet, expression sharpening. Movement in South America. Someone's trying to reconstruct the old conflict rituals, force bloodlines back into opposition frameworks. How many practitioners involved? Unknown, but the magical signature suggests significant power. He looked at her. This is what we built the foundation for, stopping exactly this kind of regression. Jasmine stood, already running through tactical options. 5 years of partnership had made threat assessment automatic. I'll mobilize the Guardian team. You coordinate with our breaker contacts in the region. If we move fast, we can interrupt before they complete the ritual. Jasmine, he caught her hand. You're pregnant. Maybe you should... Should what? Let you handle it alone? Sit safely while others fight the battles we started? She squeezed his hand. We're partners, Do-yoon. That doesn't stop because I'm carrying our child. It just means we're more careful. He studied her face, then nodded. More careful, but together. Always together. They moved in synchronization, each alerting their respective teams, coordinating responses across 3 continents. The foundation they'd built wasn't just physical, it was a network of practitioners who'd chosen collaboration, who'd seen what partnership between opposing bloodlines could accomplish. As Jasmine sent the final alert, she felt the prophecy pulse through their connection. 5 years ago, that pulse would have pushed toward conflict. Now it simply facilitated coordination, each bloodline's strength amplifying the others without demanding dominance. They'd transformed a curse into a tool, a weapon into a shield, a war into a legacy. And in doing so, they'd proven what their ancestors had never believed possible, that destiny was a choice, not a sentence, that perfect opposition, given the opportunity, could become perfect unity. The Foundation's work would continue. Threats would emerge, challenges would arise, but they would face them together, breaker and guardian, husband and wife, partners in the truest sense. The prophecy had promised eternal war. They'd delivered eternal peace through strength. And somewhere in a dimension where magical law was written, the ancient binding rewrote itself one final time. Not, when two legacies collide at equal strength, destiny doesn't choose a winner, it creates a war that can never end. But, when two legacies unite at equal strength, destiny transcends choice, it creates a balance that can never be broken. 23 years later, the convergent site in Seoul hummed with familiar energy. Maya Kang stood at the entrance to the underground chamber, reviewing her tablet one final time before entering. At 22, she'd inherited her parents' features in equal measure. Her mother's curves and complexion, her father's sharp cheekbones and intense gaze. And the marks. Silver-red scarification that wrapped around both forearms, visible proof of a dual bloodline that shouldn't exist. Breaker and guardian, perfectly balanced from birth. "You ready?" Her partner's voice came from behind. David Osai, whose own bloodline carried guardian magic from his Ghanaian ancestors, though his breaker heritage traced back to Korean refugees who'd settled in Ghana generations ago. "Ready as I'll ever be." Maya looked at the chamber entrance, feeling the pull she'd experienced since childhood. The convergence site is destabilizing again. If we don't reinforce the wards, the binding rituals will fail and we'll have a dimensional breach. I read the briefing. David moved to stand beside her, not quite touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. "Your parents did this 23 years ago. They started a war then. We're trying to prevent one. Actually, they ended a war. Read your history." He smiled slightly. "The old bloodline conflicts, the eternal cycles of revenge, all ended when your parents chose partnership over domination." Maya had heard the stories her entire life, how her mother had touched her father and activated a prophecy that should have destroyed both bloodlines, how they'd transformed curse into collaboration, how they'd built a foundation that changed magical society's entire structure. Big legacy to inherit. "What if we can't do it?" she asked quietly. "What if we're not strong enough?" "Then we call for backup like any rational practitioner would." David finally took her hand, and she felt his magic respond to hers. Not conflicting, not competing, just complementing. "But we'll probably be fine. We've trained for this our whole lives." "We've trained separately. Guardian techniques for me, breaker methods for you. This is the first time we've had to work together?" He squeezed her hand. "We've been working together since primary school, Maya. Remember that project where we had to balance opposing magical forces? We got top marks. That was theory. This is practical application of the same principles. Relax, we've got this." Maya took a breath, centering herself the way her mother had taught her. David was right. They'd been preparing for this moment unconsciously for years. Every training session, every theoretical discussion, every debate about the proper use of bloodline powers. They entered the chamber together. The convergence site recognized them immediately. Dual bloodlines, perfect balance, exactly what the space had been designed to accommodate since her parents' renovation. The symbols on the walls flared to life, responding to their presence. "The deterioration is worse than the reports indicated. We're looking at complete collapse within 48 hours unless we intervene." "Then we intervene." Maya moved to the altar where the prophecy scroll rested, integrated into the chamber's structure, but inactive since her parents had completed their binding. "The scroll contains the original reinforcement patterns. If we channel through it, we risk activating a new binding prophecy, one tailored to us specifically." David joined her at the altar, studying the scroll's dormant symbols. "Are you sure about this?" Maya met his eyes, seeing the same uncertainty she felt reflected back. They'd known each other 16 years, trained together at her parents' foundation for the past 6, worked dozens of cases involving bloodline conflicts and convergent site management. But this, combining their powers at a prophetic nexus point, this was different. The alternative is letting the site collapse and creating a dimensional breach that could kill thousands. My parents made their choice 23 years ago. Now we make ours." David nodded slowly. "Partners? Partners." They placed their hands on the scroll simultaneously, and the world ignited. The prophecy woke with a roar, recognizing dual bloodlines at a convergence point, sensing the same pattern that had activated 23 years ago. But this time, the response was different. No compulsion toward conflict, no push toward domination, just a question whispered through their combined consciousness. Will you continue the balance or forge something new? Maya felt her mother's guardian magic flowing through her veins, stabilizing and protecting. She felt her father's breaker power analyzing and adjusting. But more than that, she felt David's presence, his own dual heritage creating harmonies she'd never experienced alone. The old prophecy ended with my parents. We don't need another binding. We need reinforcement of what already exists. David's magic surged through their connection, breaking the decaying portions of the wards while Maya's guardian power immediately rebuilt them stronger. Back and forth, destruction and creation, perfectly synchronized. The chamber stabilized. The prophecy scroll pulsed once, then settled back into dormancy. Not because they'd activated a binding, but because they'd proven one wasn't necessary. They'd inherited balance. They didn't need to create it. When the magic finally settled, they stood at the altar, hands still linked, breathing hard from the exertion. That, David said, was intense. That was necessary. Maya looked at their linked hands, seeing faint marks beginning to form. Not the binding scars her parents carried, but something simpler. Partnership marks, the kind that appear when practitioners choose to work together long-term, by mutual agreement rather than magical compulsion. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" David asked, examining his own palm where similar marks were appearing. "Partnership bonds, like my parents have, but..." Maya studied the patterns. "Ours are different, chosen, not imposed. Because we learned from their example," he smiled. "We got to choose from the beginning what they had to fight for." Maya thought about her parents, the foundation they'd built, the legacy they'd created, the balance they'd proven possible. Her entire life had been shaped by their decision to transform opposition into collaboration, and now she had the chance to do the same, on her own terms. "The chamber is stable," she said, checking the ward integrity. "We should report back to..." "Maya." David hadn't released her hand. "Before we go back, before we file the reports and return to normal operations, I need to say something." She turned to face him fully, seeing nervousness in his expression that was completely unlike his usual confidence. "We've known each other 16 years, worked together 6, and every single day I've been more certain that I don't want to do this with anyone else. The work, the legacy, the future. I want to build it with you, not because of bloodlines or prophecies or magical compatibility." He took a breath. "Because I love you, and I'm hoping you might feel the same." Maya's heart raced. She'd known, of course, had felt the pull between them that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with genuine connection. But hearing him say it, choosing to voice it rather than letting proximity or destiny make the decision, "Yes, I do. Feel the same. Love you. Want the future with you." She laughed softly. "And apparently I'm terrible at romantic declarations." "Good, because I was worried I'd be the only one stumbling through this." He pulled her closer, and the partnership marks on their palms glowed warmly. "So we're doing this? Building something together?" "We've been building something together since we were 6, and you helped me smuggle that injured bird into your dormitory." She kissed him, feeling the rightness of the choice. "This is just making it official. Like your parents did?" "Better than my parents did," Maya corrected. "They had to fight destiny for their partnership. We get to choose it freely from the start." They left the chamber hand in hand, partnership marks visible for anyone who knew what to look for. The convergent site was stable, the wards were reinforced, and 2 more practitioners had chosen balance over conflict. Above ground in the Foundation's sole office, Doyun Kong reviewed the status report on his tablet, then showed it to his wife. "They did it," Jasmine said, reading the data. "Stabilized the site without activating a new binding. They learned from our example, chose partnership before destiny could impose it. Doyoon closed the tablet, looking at his wife of 23 years. We changed the pattern. We started changing it. They're continuing. Jasmine moved to the window overlooking the city. How many other bloodlines are out there choosing collaboration because we proved it was possible? Last count, 47 confirmed partnerships between traditionally opposing bloodlines, 23 foundation facilities worldwide, over 200 practitioners trained in convergence management. He joined her at the window. The war ended, Jasmine. Really ended. Not just paused, transformed. She leaned against him, comfortable in the touch that had evolved from magical compulsion to genuine affection to bone-deep partnership over 2 decades. Our daughter just chose the same path, with better information and preparation than we had. He wrapped an arm around her. That's what legacy should be, each generation building on the last instead of repeating their mistakes. You think she'll thank us? Eventually, after she's finished being annoyed that we documented everything for training purposes, he smiled. She sent a message, by the way, said she and David are heading back to Geneva for debrief. And they wanted us to know they're filing partnership registration papers, official team formation. His smile widened. She's doing it the proper way, with paperwork and procedures, instead of our method of activate ancient prophecy first, figure out logistics later. Jasmine laughed. Our method worked. Our method terrified everyone, including ourselves. He kissed her temple. But yes, it worked. And now our daughter gets to build on our foundation instead of fighting the same battles. They stood together, watching the city lights come on as evening approached, thinking about bloodlines and prophecies and the choices that defined them. 23 years ago, they'd grabbed each other in a moment of crisis and accidentally activated a binding that should have destroyed both their families. Instead, they'd transformed it into the foundation of a new magical paradigm. Now their daughter was following in their footsteps, not because prophecy demanded it, but because they'd shown her a better way. That was legacy, not power passed through violence, but wisdom passed through example. The prophecy had promised eternal war. They'd delivered eternal partnership, and the cycle they'd transformed would continue through their children, their children's children, spreading outward in ripples that would eventually touch every bloodline that had once believed opposition had to mean conflict. Balance through choice, unity through understanding, peace through partnership. That was the legacy worth inheriting, and it all started with a cleaning woman who wasn't afraid to touch a mafia boss, and a mafia boss who chose collaboration over domination when destiny gave him the choice. Sometimes the best prophecies are the ones